Hi guys, I wanted to put together a video to kind of share with you some presentation techniques in this digital world. You guys are going to be giving presentations over Microsoft Teams or some sort of recorded platform and submitting them to your teacher so that we can grade your presentation. And there are definitely some disadvantages to presenting in this format versus presenting in person. But there are some ways that we can try to make our online presentations just as effective as we would in-person presentations. So as you know in our class, presentations are an important part. For the TMP, there is an entire category on the rubric about your presentation techniques and being an effective presenter. So, regardless of whether we are virtual or in person, you will still be assessed on this same part of the rubric. So we need to make sure that we are actively working towards being the best presenter we can, regardless of the platform where we are presenting. So I have some tips for you about things that you can do to be an effective presenter over Zoom or over Teams, so that you can score highly in those categories. So the first suggestion is about being thoughtful about your background and your setting. I know for a lot of us, we don't have much choice with that. So obviously, there are some limitations there potentially, but the number one thing would be that you need to have a quiet background, right? So when you go to record your official presentation with your team, you really need to make sure that wherever you are is quiet. Whether that means you have to tell people in your house, hey, I need you to be silent for the next 20 minutes, or if you can take yourself out of wherever it is that is loud and try to do the recording elsewhere. But regardless, you want to make sure it's as quiet as possible because sound over these Skype and Zoom and team meetings, it just comes through so much more clearly. So any distracting noise that's going on in your background is really going to tank your presentation. Another thing you should consider is the background. Where are you? What is behind you or what is around you? If at all possible, you want as clean of a background as possible. You want it to be almost non-existent. I mean, in some ways you want it to be like a blank slate, a blank wall. And I know that may not be possible, but being somewhere that doesn't have a ton of things hung on the wall behind you, there's not a lot for the audience to stare at besides you. And even though you may personally want that, you may not want the audience to stare at you. As far as an effective presentation technique, we really need it to be as distraction-free as possible. One way you could do this if you don't feel like you have an area like that in your house is to go somewhere else, to go out to a library that's allowing people inside, or to go to a friend's house or a relative's house where they would have more of a space like that. Another thing you could do is even hang a white sheet on the wall behind you. I know that sounds silly, but you can pull up your camera, try to hang the sheet on the wall, and it'll immediately cover up anything that's behind you. The next suggestion that I have is to stand up. I know that for many of us, our initial desire is to sit and be comfortable and all of that. But truly, part of, I think, what is going to make or break your effectiveness as a presenter is your ability to kind of engage with the camera. And one of the best ways for you to automatically do that is to stand up. First of all, it's going to make you feel like you're in more of an official setting. It's going to make you feel maybe like you're giving this in person rather than, online. But it's also going to allow us to see your body language. And body language is so important. As you can tell, I move my hands around quite a lot. So being able to see my hands is a big part of who I am and how I talk. Similarly, it'll also make you feel like you're doing something very professional. It'll feel different than you sitting at your computer for class day in and day out. Now, if you do stand up, you're going to have to raise your laptop up to the level of so it's clear we can see you in the frame. You don't want to be looking down at the computer. So you might want to pile some books underneath it or put it up on top of a dresser, something like that, so that it is at eye level and we're not like looking up at your nose or something strange, okay? Another thing is to dress the way that you would as if you were giving a presentation in person. You want to look as professional as possible. So whereas you might normally show up to class in PJs and whatever, for this, you want to actually dress up. It's going to make you feel different. You're going to feel like you're taking something more seriously. But also that's going to come across in your video. It's going to come across how seriously you took it based on how you dress. Now, that doesn't mean we have to wear like formal attire or anything like that. And even if you are standing up, you'll likely only be seen from the waist up. So it's just about, again, dressing in such a way that you are taking it seriously and you're looking professional. Remember that this is a college level class and eventually we will be making videos to share with the college board. So they're going to want to see that you're taking it seriously. So you may want to dress as you would for a job interview or something like that. Also, rehearse. Practice is key. I cannot tell you how important it is for you to practice. This is true of any presentation. I think a lot of us feel like, oh, I'll wing it. I'll be fine. I'll just get up there and say, I generally know what I need to say. But the reality is that you need to prepare. You need to practice ahead of time. And with the online aspect of these presentations, we really don't need to be reading off of note cards or having notes with us. It's going to come across very clearly when you're reading off of note cards because you're going to be looking down to do that instead of actually looking at the camera. So you want to make sure that throughout your presentation, you are looking at the camera on your computer. That way you are maintaining that eye contact and you are clearly engaged with the audience. You're not looking at notes. Rehearsing also will help you avoid saying filler words like and ah and like and all of those things. And naturally we all do it. I've done it a million times already in this video. It's a natural part of us speaking. But we want to try to cut down on those in these kinds of videos and these kinds of presentations because what that does is it's almost like a loud foghorn to anyone in the audience. You're going to start noticing that you're saying it a million times and then you're going to get in your own head about it. And the audience themselves notice when you're saying filler words like frequently. Another way that you could try to avoid saying those filler words besides just practicing, the more times you get comfortable with your information, the less likely it's going to be that you're going to use those words. But another thing that you should do is try to slow down. We don't need to talk a million miles an hour. We also don't need to use language that's well above something we would normally use in our regular conversation. We don't want to try to be the this fake version of ourselves that isn't real. We want to come across as a real human. But we also probably, with slowing down, when you finish a thought, close your mouth. I know it seems crazy. But a lot of times those filler words come out because we leave our mouths open after we've completed a thought and before we move on to the next one. And in that space in between, what happens is our mouth is open and that filler word just comes out as a way to fill that silence or fill that space. So if you can practice trying to just close your mouth after you have finished saying something, you might avoid letting those words slip out. My other suggestion is about your tone of voice. The biggest thing I think that happens in online presentations is that people tend to sound monotone and incredibly bored. When you sound bored, the audience gets bored. So you need to try actively to treat this like a performance, to treat this like a place where you would want to inject enthusiasm and passion as much as you can. That's going to come through in the cadence of your voice. It's also going to come through in the emphasis that you put on certain words. And it's going to come through in your tone. So we need to try as much as possible to inject our voices with energy and with enthusiasm. We need to smile wherever possible. We need to use facial expressions. It might be helpful, actually, that you're seeing yourself sort of recorded back to you on your screen because you can see if you look incredibly bored. we don't want to look bored. We want to look excited and happy to be there. You guys got to choose your topics. This is something that we've been working on for quite some time. So you want to make it come across as though you are excited to talk about this and that you are, jazzed to be here. And even if that's not true, fake it. Fake it for the next 10 minutes. You need to be aware also of your facial expressions and your body language while your fellow presenters are presenting, because your video is still up and is still showing. So we can still see exactly what you're doing. You don't want to be doing distracting things. You don't want to be having a side conversation with someone in your room. You don't want to be looking bored to tears. You need to still be engaged and still act as though you're a part of the presentation, even though you are not the one speaking. That is so important. And I can't emphasize enough that if you do that, if you kind of let your attention wander, you try to open a tab on your browser and do something else, it's going to be immediately apparent to all of us. So you need to be remaining engaged, remaining interested, and listening throughout the course of your recording. So those are my tips for effective online presentation techniques. And I hope that they help you as you prepare for the TMP. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with and hear about all the fantastic research that you've been doing.